Hi students, and welcome to today's live IELTS class. My name is Adrian and I am streaming to you from beautiful Victoria here on the west coast of Canada, surrounded by the amazing Pacific Ocean. Welcome Khyber, hi students, welcome members. In today's class we are looking at the IELTS reading section, and I will show you what you need to do to have enough time so that you can finish the reading section with a band 9. While we wait for some more of your classmates, this lesson is presented to you by aehelp.com. That's academicenglishhelp.com for academic IELTS studies. Visit us there. For the general IELTS, check us out at IELTShelp.com. The reading materials that we're using today will be found on these websites later this year. Hi Carolina, welcome our moderator. Our academic IELTS website looks like this with the blue background. All you need to do to join our premium IELTS packages, click that big red button. It's a one-time payment for lifetime access, so it's well worth the investment. We are an official British Council IELTS Test Registration Center and certified agent, so you can ask us questions and we will certainly get the answers for you. This is our general IELTS website here, same layout, green background. Click that big red button there to join the premium package. All right, so if you want to get our apps, you can download Academic IELTS Help and General IELTS Help from your app stores. Our apps will link to the website. So this one links to aehelp.com, General IELTS Help links to gieltshelp.com, and that integrates your learning materials. So it's a really cool way to learn just about anywhere, anytime, as long as you have internet access. And if you have questions, send me an email to adrian@aehelp.com. So we've got lots of classes coming up still this week. We've got reading right now, and then this will be followed by a listening part 1 and part 2 practice and strategy class. And then tomorrow we'll have more reading and we'll have more listening, and then we'll have a Q&A session for members on Saturday and a speaking part 3 for everyone on Saturday as well. So make sure to join for that. All right, getting into today's reading. So here we are. This is what we're looking at today. Let me just maximize our space here on the screen. Okay, let me get this as big as possible so that you can read it really nice and well. All right, so there we go. Maybe a little bit bigger even. If it's a bit fuzzy for you, please set your YouTube setting to 720p and then you'll get a sharper image. Okay, everyone. So again, we're developing some new exams. You'll have these available later on. Here is this one. It's titled Berlin from 1945 to 1990. So right away we realize that, okay, this passage is going to be in the subject of history, right? So it's definitely a good idea to read up on some world history before you sit the IELTS exam. Now, when we look at this and we try to predict it, the years are very interesting. So immediately you should realize something here. 1945, what happened? What significant event happened in 1945? Thanks for asking, Carolina. I'm feeling a bit better today. Still not 100%, but let's say 65, 70%, 60%. All right, Irfan, welcome to our group of members. So you look at this and so don't just read without thinking, okay? That's the most important first tip that I have to give you. So digest the information, think about the information. So here, when you read this title, Berlin, from 1945 to 1990, what significant event happened in 1945? Harwinder says World War II, but be more specific. So, Second World War, what happened in 1945 with the Second World War? Ois says Berlin was divided into two parts. Yes, that's good, Ois. So, World War II ended in 1945. People should know that, right? World War II officially went from 1939 to 1945, October, I believe. That's when World War II ended. And then Europe was divided between East and West. Very, very good. And Berlin was divided into two parts. Berlin, of course, being the capital of Germany. And Berlin was divided into Eastern and Western Germany. And what did that mean for the system, the social system? So what was the Western system? And this kind of information you should know before going into the IELTS exam. It's quite important. Okay. Yeah, so June says World War II ends. Germany is separated exactly into East and West. And what social system separated Germany at that time? It's still a social system that separates much of the world today when we think of China, North Korea, Vietnam, Cuba, United States, France, Germany. So what two social systems? Ois says part of it was governed by the Soviet Union and the other part was governed by the West, the USA. Yep, Ois, that's true. So what's the difference of the social systems that governed the two different parts? And you have to know this because this is current world history. And of course, a lot of the world today and the politics today is still in a large part controlled by these two social systems. So before you begin reading, again, the topic of today's lesson is enough time for a Band 9. And the only way that you're going to have enough time for a Band 9, basically a perfect score in the reading, is if you are able to think of the fundamental information that's necessary for this passage. Okay? Very good. So Carolina says it's communism and capitalism, or Ois says capitalism versus socialism, which is kind of the same idea, right? Exactly, right? So Eastern Germany, a lot of Eastern Europe, or the Europe under Soviet control, was influenced by the communist or socialist social system, and the Western by the capitalist. So a little bit of history there. And that information you should think about, okay? So what happens in 1990 then? Okay, so in 1945, we know that Berlin is divided along with Germany and much of Europe. The world is divided in a large way following World War II between these two systems, capitalism and communism. And then what happens in 1990? So what happens in 1990? Okay. And again, if you think about all of this before you start reading, you're going to have a much better chance of being able to read quickly and being able to answer the questions correctly. Okay? Okay, so Thomas Vinod over in our General English Help channel, thank you, Thomas, says that Berlin is reunited, and Paulo Reese says the Berlin Wall falls down. And Sherwin is asking the fall of the Berlin Wall. Yeah, it's the same thing, Sherwin, as what Thomas just said. It's reunification. Why does that happen? So why does reunification of Berlin actually happen? Why does the wall collapse there? Okay. So nice to see more and more students joining in on our General English Help channel as well. Hopefully you'll become members as well. Okay, so yeah, so Germany, the wall, it's a very significant event in modern history. I'm sure many of you that are maybe a little bit older like myself still remember this. It was a huge media event and historical event. Okay, so why in 1990? So we've got 45 years of these of this separation and of these two systems, and then why does suddenly? Okay, Paulo Reese says 1990 was my first birthday. There you go, Paulo. So very significant in your first birthday. Okay, Sherwin says there's unrest among the citizens. Yeah, not just that, but Soviet Union. Yeah, OIS says so. OIS says after the Soviet Union is gone. Yeah, so the Soviet USSR is coming to its end, and a lot of the Eastern European regions under Soviet control are now liberating themselves and moving from the forced communism back into their capitalist systems, or adopting the capitalist system. So exactly. So Janiel says a war. Maybe we can call that a war. Anybody? This is my bonus point for today. What is the war called? What was the war called between the United States and the Soviet Union? There wasn't actually too much direct physical fighting. There was indirect physical fighting, like in Vietnam. So what was the war between the U.S. and USSR called? And please don't Google it. Okay. So what was that? Yeah, very good, Jaineel. And Jaineel, good job, Carolina. Yeah. So again, name of a war, capital in this case. Okay. So if you're in the IELTS, you'd get it wrong if you wrote it small or lowercase. Okay. So keep in mind that anytime you're answering a name, it's capital C, capital W. So that was the Cold War. Okay. Jyoti, same thing. Capital W there. All right. Cold War. Irfan, very good. The Cold War. Thomas, very nice. The Cold War. Absolutely. Okay, so basically in 1990, right? Just coming back to this real quick, we are at the end of the Cold War. All right, that's just it. Okay, awesome. So now we've got lots of information, lots of prediction, and you should think at this level when you read this title. Okay, I can tell that many of you have a pretty good idea of these two key dates and what was happening. So take a second to think about all of that, because it's going to make it much easier to understand the passage and the questions, and that way you will have enough time to comprehend the information, because that way even when you have some new words and some confusing sentences, your brain can figure out the information based on what it knows. Does everybody understand the importance of this? Okay, so this is the big tip here for the start of today's lesson. So in order to have enough time for comprehension of the passage and questions with one read, it is very important to reference all of your existing knowledge on the topic so that your mind can make sense of new and confusing English quickly and easily. Okay, so everybody sees that, right? So even though it might take you 2 minutes to think about this, like, okay, 1945, World War II ends, Europe is divided, the world is divided, two systems, communism, capitalism. All right, 1990, Soviet Union falls, Cold War comes to an end. Berlin is reunited. Okay, what are these two systems? So capitalist, there's competition, there's a lot of economic boom, communism. So you get all this information in your head, and then you start reading, you're way better off. Okay. Sherwin, yeah, World War II, yeah, absolutely. Both of the W's have to be capital. Yeah, good question. Absolutely. Yeah, just like Cold War. Yeah, World War II, all capital. And if you write the word to, Sherwin, the T has to be capital as well. Absolutely always. Okay. All right. So now we look at the question, see if we can get some further help here. All right, so reading passage 1, it's actually 2 here, has 7 paragraphs, A to G. Which paragraph contains the following information? So write the correct letter A to G in boxes 14 to 20 on your answer sheet. Okay, so here we have the paragraph matching. Let's read these. These are helpful at home. Practice paraphrasing these. Okay. This is all in the passage somewhere, so let's read over them. Number 14, a treaty which allotted control of German territory to 4 countries. So at home you'd want to paraphrase this, an agreement that allowed control of German regions to 4 different nations. Okay. 15, a barrier is built between 2 German nations. 16, Berliners are cut off from essential goods and services. 17, revolutions in other nations cause East Germany to demand change. 18, the division of Germany into 2 parts. 19, a push and pull between Soviet and Western interests in Germany. Number 20, the Allied powers bring millions of tons of supplies to the people of Berlin. Okay. All right. So here we have these paragraph matching. These ones you cannot do by skimming and scanning. So a really important point here, the only way you're going to have enough time for a band 9, not a band 5 or band 6, but a band 9, is if you actually read the passage. And these types of questions you cannot skim read for because they're paraphrased and they're not coming in the order of the passage. Okay, so this would be an impossible reading passage to try to do by skimming and scanning. So don't do that. Okay. All right, and then we have true, false, not given, and we've got lots of true, false, not given. We've got 6 true, false, not given questions here. We're going to just ignore those for now because, well, we don't know if they're true, false, or not given, so there's no point there. All right, so now what we can do is we can read the passage, and when we read the passage, we want to visualize it. Okay, we want to see it. So this is Berlin. Imagine that you are a German living in Germany, more specifically living in Berlin. Perhaps you are living in Eastern Germany. That's what I would choose here. Eastern Germany, living in the east side of Berlin under communist rule. That's right, Baccarat. No need to read those true, false, not givens. And then we visualize and go from there. So here we go. Let's read together. This is reading, so don't just listen to me. We'll have a listening practice class next in about an hour. So for now, read with me. Okay, practice your reading. Let's go from the top. Berlin from 1945 to 1990. After World War II, Germany became 2 countries. The western portion, controlled by 3 of the Allied powers, Britain, France, United States, named the Federal Republic of Germany, or more commonly West Germany, and the eastern portion, controlled by the final Allied power, the Soviet Union, named the German Democratic Republic, but more commonly known as East Germany. The current German capital of Berlin, then located entirely in East Germany, was similarly divided between the Western powers and the Soviets. Okay, so you should visually see this, right? So you see Germany, And you see Germany is divided west and east, okay? And Berlin is here, but it's also divided between east and west, okay? So does everybody see that? Okay, you should have visualized this. And this part here is controlled by US, UK, and France, okay? And this part here by the USSR. And similarly, this part here by USSR and that part of Berlin. Okay, so kind of a weird division there. Definitely you should be able to visualize that. Okay, Kyber says yes, absolutely. Jainil says check that. All right, so clear picture of that. Okay. All right, what a difficult situation for those Germans as well. All right, so let's keep going. Okay, again, keep visualizing. Now, the speed that I'm reading is absolutely fast enough to finish the reading passage and get a high band as long as you are staying calm and paying attention to the information. Let's do this. World War II ended with the capture of Germany by the Allied powers. The natural question was, who would take control of the newly captured territory? The four most powerful Allied countries, Britain, the United States, France, and the Soviet Union, came to an agreement at the Potsdam Conference in May 1945. They divided the country roughly evenly in four parts. The British would control the northwest, the French would control the southwest, the Americans would control the southeast, and the Soviets would control the northwest. Berlin was also partitioned. The French in the northwest, the British in the west, the Americans in the southwest, and the Soviets in the east. These divisions were never meant to be maintained in the long term, but they were. The division of Berlin became representative of the division of the world, divided between two superpowers, West and East, the US in the West and the USSR in the East. Once allies, the Soviets and the Western countries could not agree on a reparations agreement, a treaty which would punish the Germans through economic means. The Western countries wanted a relatively open German economy. That is, they wanted Germany to remain self-sufficient. The Soviets, on the other hand, wanted to punish the Germans for the millions of Soviet deaths suffered during the war. But such punitive measures are often cited as a key cause of the Second World War, as German reparations were humiliating and debilitating to the German economy and the German people. This resulted in hardship, poverty, violence, and ultimately the rise of Hitler. The Western nations did not want to see a repeat of such a humiliation. Because of this disagreement, negotiations between the two sides collapsed, and ultimately diplomatic relations as well. The Western countries, in a response to the collapse in relations, merged their zones at a national level in 1947. In their combined zone, they advocated the revival of the German economy so that the German people were not completely reliant on financial aid. The Soviets feared this union because it gave the collective more power than the Soviets had in the region. The tipping point for the Soviets was the introduction of a new currency in the Western zones. A day after this took place, the USSR imposed the Berlin Blockade, the first major international crisis of what came to be known as the Cold War. In response to the Confederation of Western sectors, the Soviets blocked all rail, road, and marine access to the Western-controlled sections of Berlin. With the stroke of a pen, Berliners, 2.5 million of them, had no access to their basic needs of food, electricity, and medicine. The Western response to this Soviet provocation was to institute what came to be known as the Berlin Airlift, a year-long effort that involved 700 aircraft to deliver supplies to the cut-off sections of Berlin. During this time, 270,000 flights delivered approximately 2.3 million tons of supplies to the city. Without this effort, Berliners would have starved. The introduction of the new currency and the resulting Berlin blockade and airlift were key causes of the hardening of relations between the Soviets and the West. Over the next decade, relations between the two sides deteriorated to the point that in 1961, the Berlin Wall was erected by the East Germans and Soviets between the two sections of the city, separating the Soviet-controlled East German section from the Western-controlled West German section. The wall would become a powerful symbol for the conflict between capitalism and communism, and between the United States and the USSR. The German people, once adversaries who drew the Soviets and Americans into common alliance, were now pawns in a dangerous game that was being played across the globe. The partition of Berlin lasted until 1989. Revolutions against communism in other Eastern European countries earlier that year brought about change in East Germany as well. The East German people revolted, and after weeks of protest, the East German government relented and opened up the border on 9 November 1989. Over the coming weeks and months, people gleefully chipped away at the wall. Demolition of the wall took 17 months to complete. German unification officially took place on 3rd of October 1990. What was once an ideological battleground between East and West would eventually become what we know Berlin as today, a singular cosmopolitan city of people working towards mutual prosperity. All right, so we've finished the passage, and hopefully all of you realize that doing all of that predicting of what happened in 1945 to 1990 in world history, specifically in Berlin, according to the socialist systems, there was a lot of information in there about that, right? So there was a lot of information about the Cold War, about capitalism versus communism. So really, really, really helpful, right? Okay. Khyber says it's very sad, but Khyber, in the end, it's a nice story because Germany is reunited. The people of Berlin are reunited again. So, yeah, humans take time to figure it out. Okay. So here we go. Pay attention to this. Note, by the way, you may use any letter more than once. All right. Now, what we want to do, because we visualized, we should have a pretty good idea of where this information is contained. Okay. And a good strategy to think about for this type of question of which paragraph has this information is to think about the passage in thirds. So you have this passage and you have paragraph A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Okay. So the way that you want to think about this is in thirds. So you have A and B as the first third. Okay. You have C, D, and E as the second third, and then you have F and G as the third third. So even if you don't know exactly where this information is, you should have an idea of the general region within the passage, and then you can identify it. So rather than skim reading the whole passage, which is really time-taking, okay, again, the topic here is enough time for a band 9. So instead of trying to skim read the whole passage, if you're not reading the passage, all you have to do now is just look at the region. And if you don't find it, it's okay, go to the next question. Okay, let me show you how to do this. All right. Okay, number 14, a treaty which allotted control of German territory to 4 countries. I actually remember which paragraph this was in. I'm like 95% sure. I definitely remember the region. Anybody know, was it the first third, second third, or third third? Okay, so was this an A and B, C, D, E, or F and G? Okay, so Ois and Harwinder and Carolina are saying B. I actually remember it was B as well. So the first paragraph introduced kind of the history in 1945 and what happened at the end of the war. And then paragraph B introduced this treaty. But again, if you don't know that, if you remember that it's in the first third, very good, Ois, then you can still figure out pretty quickly that it's going to be paragraph B, right? So here, I do have a pretty good idea that it's paragraph B. Okay. Who would take control of the newly captured territory? The 4 most powerful Allied countries came to an agreement in May of 1945. Okay, so there it is. So we know that that's B. Okay. And we're able to quickly go to the next question. So number 15, a barrier is built between the 2 German nations. Okay, so this is of course the Berlin Wall. It's built between Germany. It's built specifically in Berlin, between the 2 sides of Berlin. It's the Berlin Wall. Is it the first third, the second third, or the third third? So Kyber says it's near the end. Carolina says, I think it's paragraph F. Yeah, that was coming much, much later on, right? So it wasn't till almost the end of the passage where basically the situation between East and West is getting so bad that they're like, okay, let's just put up a wall. And it was the Soviets here that were like, whoa, 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 this is too much. We're going to put up a wall, right? Anybody remember the year? Roughly the year the Berlin Wall was erected? So I know it's the last third. So I can go back. Here's the last third. The introduction of the new currency and the resulting Berlin blockade and airlift were key causes of the hardening of the relations. Over the next decade, deteriorated that in 1961, the Berlin Wall was erected. There it is, right? So 1961, very good. And a lot of you even remembered the year. Fantastic. So very nice. Okay, so there we go. So F it is. Fantastic. Okay, number 16, Berliners are cut off from essential goods and services. The more of these you answer, the faster you're going to be answering the next ones. So if you're a little bit slower answering the first 1, 2, 3, don't worry too much because you're going to get faster when you answer the last ones. Okay? Yeah, so Kyber says second, third. Paulo thinks that it's probably D or E. Yeah. And so we hop back to that part, the second third. Second third is C, D, and E. So once allies, the Soviets and the Western countries could not agree. Okay, so I might skim read this. And then I go to D. The tipping points for the Soviets was the introduction of a new currency. A day after this took place, the Berlin blockade, the first major international crisis, known as the Cold War. The blockade was blocking the rails, the roads, and access that controlled it. So Berliners, 2.5 million of them, had no access to needs of food and so on. So definitely it was D. Very good. Okay. They were cut off. That was the Berlin blockade. And you should have remembered that, right? The Berlin blockade, the name of it. Okay, very good. All right, number 17, revolutions in other nations cause East Germany to demand change. This one should be fairly easy, fairly quick. I don't think that number 17, anybody should be skimming or scanning or looking back, because it's very, very clear where this last point is made, especially when you got this one here. The barrier, the Berlin Wall, is an F. So then revolutions in other nations cause change. That's going to be G. That's very good. Okay. All right. And Thomas and Balajian and Kaolin, keep going. Sherwin, keep going on in the general English as well. Number 18, the division of Germany into two parts. All right. So that should, again, be fairly quick and easy. All right, we know it's the first third. Okay, so now as you notice, we're getting faster and faster here. So number 18, the division of Germany into two parts, into East and West. Yeah, so A or B, right? And this is where I'm going to put A, but if I'm not sure, I can check. After World War II, Germany became two countries. The western portion, okay, there we go. So it's right away there. That's very, very quick. Okay, don't waste time. When you know it's the answer, stay with it, stick with it. Number 19, a push and pull between Soviet and Western interests in Germany. Okay, so again, I think that's going to be the middle part. Okay, a push and pull. This is where the Soviets and the West are starting to disagree on ideas. Ois says that's going to be C. I agree, Ois. That is C. That's where they start to introduce the conflict, right? The middle of this essay deals with the growing conflict of interests in Germany. So C, again, you can check that if you're not sure, but I think a lot of you are like, okay, that's going to be the right one. All right, Franklin, very good with A for the previous, and Thomas for that one for the G. Yeah. Okay, nice. All right, last one. Number 20, the Allied powers bring millions of tons of supplies to the people of Berlin. By this time, I'm sure that you remember that was the Berlin airlift, where there were thousands of airplane flights dropping supplies into Berlin. So where was that? Okay, Ois and Carolina and Kyber all say, well, we already looked at that once, and that was E. Okay, so here you realize you're like, okay, I'm looking for the Berlin airlift. Right? So if you remember the word airlift, and you know it's somewhere around the middle, then you can check for that too, right? So look at that, Berlin airlift, one word. Berlin airlift, a year-long effort that involved 700 aircraft. Okay, 270,000 flights. So it certainly is E. Sorry, I keep overshooting that. Okay, so there we go. And notice how when you've done the right steps and you've done the critical thinking beginning before you read the passage, beginning of the passage, and then you go through these, you're going to be much, much more accurate, okay? All right, so remember this strategy for this type of question, all right? Okay, let's look at some true, false, not given. So true, false, not given. All right, very good, Thomas. I love how you're getting the hang of this. All right, so true, false, not given. You have to first decide whether it's not given or given. So this is your first step. Figure out whether it's given or not given. Okay? So that's step number one. And the way you can do that is you need to figure out if the information is important to the passage or not important to the passage. So pre-World War II, Germany was divided into two separate nations after the war. Okay, so pre-World War II, so before World War II, Germany was divided into two separate nations after the war. Okay? Is it important for this passage to know whether or not pre-World War II, Germany was divided into two separate nations after the war? Okay? It is important, yeah? So here, this is one, sorry, it kind of looks confusing this way. So pre-World War II Germany, so that means that Germany that existed before World War II was divided into two separate nations after the war. So is it important? Yes, it's very important to this passage. So that means that it's given. Okay. And then was divided into two separate nations after the war. So World War II comes to the end, is divided, yeah, into East and West Germany, right? So it's true. Okay. You should not be searching for that answer. That's the key. Okay. So pre-World War II Germany, this is a collocation here, if you will. Okay. Was divided into two separate nations after the war. Yeah, it's true. Okay. Number 22. The Potsdam Conference was a chief cause of the Cold War. So the Cold War is the war that emerges between the Soviet Union and the West, and the Potsdam Conference is the conference that divides Germany into its four parts. Is it important for this passage to know what was the chief cause of the Cold War? Okay. Kuyper says it is important to know what was the cause of the Cold War. Yes, in this case, it is important. So it might be given. Okay. Does the paragraph give the reason for the Cold War? So Jainil says it's not important. It kind of is important, but here there is another interesting point that I haven't discussed with you with true, false, not given questions, okay? And the important point here is logic. Okay, is there one single chief cause of the Cold War? So according to your logic, if you think about this, right? So if you think about the problems that are happening between the West and the East. So you read this passage, you understood that obviously there were some problems between the Soviets and the West. So here, you have to use logic, okay? So according to your logic, if I asked you this question, okay, let me put it to you this way, and this is where you can ask yourself this question, okay? So think about it this way. What was the chief cause of the Cold War? Okay, so think about it. Was it the treaty? Was it the different social systems? Was it the currency? Was it the unification of Western Germany? Okay. So use your thinking. In IELTS, the only way that you're going to get a band 9 is if you really apply some good critical thinking. And that's why I'm always training you for this, along with some simple strategies. So ask yourself this, okay? If I were to look at this question, this true, false, not given in the IELTS, okay? And for a band 9, you have to think at the university level in the IELTS, right? So here I'm thinking, what was the chief cause of the Cold War here? Was it the treaty that they're discussing in this question? Was it the different social systems, that one was communist, the other was capitalist? Was it the introduction of a new currency so that they had a different way of using money? Was it the unification of Western Germany by the French, British, and the US? So what was the chief cause that made the Soviets really angry and said, hey, we're going to put up a wall? What do you think? So what would you think is the main reason for the push of the Cold War? So Harwinder says it's maybe the currency. I don't know, Harwinder, to be honest with you. Okay, so don't guess, all right? It's a very, so Paulo says it's the unification of Western Germany. Rashika says it's the imposing of a new currency. We don't know, right? So nobody really knows what was the main cause of the Cold War. It was likely a cumulative effect, right? So it was most likely a combination of these different pieces, okay? So if you realize this, it's really important to be able to come up with the answer, I don't know. Okay, so this is an extremely important skill, all right? I don't know. Probably nobody knows, okay? Why? Because if you come up with that answer, if you realize that, well, nobody would really know the perfect answer to this, then you are going to realize that the right answer here is not given, okay? So if you don't know, if the author probably doesn't know, then it's a not given. So you do have these rare situations where something might be important, but nobody really knows. So the author is not going to give you information that they don't know, just like you wouldn't, right? So you wouldn't tell somebody, oh, that was the chief cause, when you don't really know, all right? Does that make sense? So it's important in this rare case. It would be important to know what was the chief cause, but we don't know what was the chief cause. Nobody really knows, so it's not going to be given. Does that make sense? Okay. It's very, very important to be able to say, I don't know. In Western culture, so for those of you who are planning to study or immigrate to the US or to Canada, you will find that people are much more comfortable than in many other parts of the world saying, I don't know. Okay, so if you ask somebody for directions and they don't know, they will look at you and they will say, I don't know, please ask somebody else. I'm not from around here. Okay. Sometimes when I've traveled to other parts of country or other parts of the world, and I asked people where's that place, they didn't know, but they still gave me some weird information, and I got even more lost. And I don't know why that is, but anyway, it's important to be able to say I don't know. Okay. All right. Okay, so number 23, the United States, France, and the United Kingdom wanted an open German economy. Is it important? Okay, so far we have true and not given. Jainiel says, like in India. Yeah, I've experienced it in many countries, Jainiel, unfortunately. Yeah, so number 23, definitely important, right? The economic system of Eastern and Western Germany, definitely important. And did United States, France, and United Kingdom? Yeah, they wanted an open economy because they didn't want to humiliate the German people. They knew that that's what led to the World War II in the first place. Okay, number 24, the Berlin blockade was caused by Soviet action in West Berlin. Is it important to know what caused the Is it important to know what caused the Berlin blockade? Yeah, Cowling, kind of like the movie of Justice and Crime, I suppose, if you think about it that way. Franklin, yeah, for 23, good. And for 24, is it important to know what caused the Berlin blockade? Yeah, it's definitely important, so it's given. Is it true that the Berlin blockade was caused by Soviet action in West Berlin? Yeah, it is, right? Because the Soviets blocked access to Berlin altogether, right? It's not false. It's true. Remember that first map that I showed you? So here's Germany. Okay, so you have west and east. And remember how Berlin is in East Germany, but it's also divided into two. So what the Soviets did is they blocked access from the west into Berlin. So the US, France, they were not able to get across into East Germany. So that's why they were flying planes. Is everybody clear on what happened here now? So the Soviets literally blocked the roads and every other access from West Germany into East Germany. And because Berlin entirely was in East Germany, but divided into two, this meant that the Western Berliners, so especially the people in West Berlin, could not get help from either West Germany or from the allies of the UK, France. So is everybody clear on that now? Okay. So yes, indeed, the Berlin blockade was caused by Soviet action in West Berlin. So they blocked West Berlin from Western Germany. Okay. Keep that map in mind. All right. So again, IELTS is a thinking exam, so it's true. Okay, number 25, West Germans and Soviets were responsible for the construction of the Berlin Wall. And this should be an easy one. Is it important? Yes, so it's given. These should only take you like 10 seconds to answer correctly. West Germans and Soviets were responsible. Thomas Franklin, good job on that last one. Okay, so it's important. It's given West Germans and Soviets. Yeah, so it wasn't the West Germans, it was the East Germans, right? So it's false. Okay, very good, Irfan. Yeah, it was the East Germans and the Soviets that built the Berlin Wall, not the West Germans. The West Germans were on the other side, right? They were on the side of the UK UK, US, and France. So that one's false. It's a very quick, clear false because it disagrees with the writer. So it was the writer says the East Germans and the Soviets were responsible, right? So, all right. Yeah, Paulo, it was the East Germans. If you're not sure, so remember here, so if you're having difficulty with that one, there was this question here. A barrier is built between the two German nations. And remember that you have the answer paragraph F here. So you know that so use those questions to help you. These questions can really help you with the other questions for that passage. So if you go to F, you're like, well, I can't remember. Then here in F, they explain that it was the East and West. So let's see. And over the next decade. Okay, so 1961, the Berlin Wall was erected by East Germans and Soviets. There it is. Okay? So East Germans and Soviets, not West Germans. All right? Okay, and we have one last question remaining. The complete destruction of the wall took less than a year to complete. Is it important to know how long the Berlin Wall took to take down? Maybe. Anybody remember how long it took? Okay. So when your answer is maybe, you should keep thinking. Okay. I remember because I was actually surprised. I was like, wow, it took that long. Paulo remembers. So Paulo says it took 17 months. Yeah, I thought it would be a bit faster, but 17 months, that must have been quite the amount of material that they had to build. So 17 months, and look, a lot of you remembered it's 17 months, okay? So the complete destruction of the wall took less than a year to complete. Well, 17 months is clearly more than a year, right? So Franklin says no, and Thomas Vinod says 17 months as well. Very good. So 17 months is obviously greater than a year, right? So this is false. Careful not to write no. Okay, don't write no, Franklin. Write false or F. Okay. All right. So good job, everyone. That's how you do it. Okay, that's how you complete a passage and get a band 9 in the amount of time given. You predict, you think, you use critical thinking, you use good strategy, and you just follow the steps to completion. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Thank you, members, for your support. Coming up in 30 minutes, everyone, we will have listening practice and strategy for the listening section. So come back in 30 minutes. And if you like this kind of teaching and these materials, join our premium course at aehelp.com for academic IELTS and gltshelp.com for general IELTS. Again, it's one-time payment, well worth the investment. We help thousands of students every day to improve on their IELTS scores. I'll be back soon. Take a break, get some water, do a bit of stretching, and I'll see you shortly. I'm Adrian, signing out for now. Bye.